make them believe that the ballet is real.
When Jesus comes to heal a heart,
Eyes must tell the story.
he takes away the world's sting. Next on Joni.
Well, what would happen if one day you got everything you hoped for and then found out what you really needed you already had? Today's guest is about as famous as they come. This one-time little boy from California got everything he wanted and dreamed for. The perfect wife, a lucrative career, multiple homes, fame and fortune, and lots of it. He is known as Sting, the WCW loner champion who fought against injustice and ruled with an iron hand. Entering the ring to millions screaming his name every night, he was a man loved by all, and he became a man who hated himself. Today we will hear his amazing testimony, from addiction to prescription drugs and heartache to reconciliation and joy. His movie and book, Sting, The Moment of Truth, tells the tale of the man behind the painted face, Steve Borden. Take a look.
All the money in the world, don't you? Big house. And I'm miserable. I am miserable.
Dove Canyon Films presents a George King film, a Mitchell Gallen production. Sting, Moment of Truth. Sting, Moment of Truth.
Please help me welcome Steve Borden. He came out with the smoke and everything. It's good to have you here.
It's good to be here. But, you know, there was no telephone booth in the back, so I couldn't put the stuff on. And, you know, so
Okay.
the set's going to remain
I don't know.
intact.
I kind of like him like this. Y'all like him like this with the paint off? He looks nice.
Well, thank you.
Well, you know what? I really appreciate you sharing your story today. And I know that there are a lot of people that are... You're going across the dial and you stopped. You're like, Sting? What? On the Christian Network? I have to see what he's going to say. And you are going to share your story today. And it is an amazing story of God's grace and mercy in your life. You are a changed person because of that, aren't you, Steve?
That's right. Absolutely. Transformed completely. I mean, a 100% transformation, doing the 180 and walking the other way.
Wow, that is amazing. So I want you to stay right where you are, because we're going to hear a little bit about Steve's story. And let's just kind of go back to the beginning and talk about your family and where you were born. California, is that right?
I was actually born in Omaha, Nebraska, but raised in California.
Raised in California. So tell us about your family.
Well, I have 2 brothers and 1 sister, and my mother and father were great people and still are. We were taught the difference between right and wrong.
Right.
We had a home always, and we're always fed, and the holidays were always great, and Christmas and birthdays, and we loved each other, but we were dysfunctional. We were dysfunctional, and I didn't really know what that was. I thought that most every family was like ours, and I think probably a lot of them are. But anyway, that was our family, and we all played sports. My dad coached us in sports and played catch with us, you know, in the backyard, and then I ended up going into professional bodybuilding and then off into wrestling.
Okay, so now there was something that happened, I guess, when you were about 8 or 9 years old, where I guess a little bit of God came into the picture through your mother. Tell us about that.
Yeah, my mother. I'm glad you asked that, because my mom, in desperation, 4 kids, my dad working, 6 days a week, living, paycheck to paycheck, and blue collar all the way, barely. And she was desperate and just in need. Her whole family was still out in Nebraska, so there she was out in Southern California, just north of L.A., and just, California life and the California cost of living and everything, and she was desperate. And she had a friend who lived next door who invited her to go to a group of women in a little Bible study, and she had a group of women who loved on her and shared the Word of God with her, and then led her to the Lord. And she accepted the Lord with this little group of women, and then after that tried desperately to get us as a family to go to church. And, we were all rebelling against that. We just did not want to, why all of a sudden are we going to go to church? Why, and my dad didn't want to go either, and so my poor mom was there to fend for herself. And after maybe a couple of years or so on and off going to church, she finally, gave in.
But a couple of seeds, I'm sure, were planted in your life even back then. So now you begin to bodybuild. I know in the book and in the movie you've got pictures, and you were into lifting weights and all of that. Now, how did that then lead into wrestling? Well,
I co-owned a health club in Southern California. It was a Gold's Gym.
That's a big thing in California, staying fit, right?
It really is, yeah. And I know I was in the bodybuilding scene, and oh man, what a waste of time that was. But I had a guy come in one day, and he had 3 big guys with him. I mean, big guys. And he asked me if he could put up this sign in the gym, a little recruiting sign, to try to recruit one more guy. He was looking for 4 guys to break into pro wrestling, and this little guy was going to be the manager. And they were going to take the world of wrestling by storm. And they tried for a couple weeks to get a 4th guy and couldn't get anybody. Nobody bid on it. And finally he said, "What about you?" And I said, I'm not interested in that. And he was showing me magazines, wrestling magazines, and I was thumbing through, looking at the pictures going, there's no way in the world I want to do that. And I had seen maybe 30 minutes of wrestling on TV in my whole life.
You're kidding.
No, growing up, growing up in California where I grew up, we didn't have wrestling on TV.
Oh, okay.
So the 30-minute little time that I had was when we went out back to Nebraska to visit my mom.
We had it in South Carolina, by the way. That's where I'm from.
You guys had a lot of it there. But I went out to Nebraska to visit my cousins, and they were watching wrestling, and that was like the only little dose that I ever had. So when this guy asked me to get into wrestling, I thought, no way. And Hulk Hogan used to come into that gym to work out.
Wow.
When he was in town, and people say, you know who that is? And, I know him from the Rocky movie, but that's it.
Yeah.
And, but, he was Hulk Hogan, the big wrestler, and so that's, long story short, I ended up saying, okay, I'll try this wrestling thing.
Okay.
Because they were talking about the money to be made there.
So now you hadn't done like wrestling in high school. I know that.
Nope.
So you didn't really, it was just like a whole new thing.
I went through a wrestling camp that lasted 3 months or so, something like that, in Southern California, and we were there, every day, and it was 3 hours each session, and sometimes it was 2 times a day, and
now,
sort of learned the ropes.
How old were you at this point, Steve?
I was 26.
26. And so you're like really in the prime, I guess, as far as physique and all, right?
Yeah, I was.
Okay, so then you decide to get involved. What happened?
Well, this little manager guy took us to a big match at the sports arena in L.A., and we saw Hulk Hogan and Big John Studd and Andre the Giant and the British Bulldogs and all these.
Andre the Giant?
Andre the Giant, yeah.
Wow, I was always fascinated by him.
He was a giant, too. He really was.
I'm seeing his hand and all. I've seen like on TV. It was just
That's
huge.
Right.
Yeah.
But, we went and we saw this show, and it was packed. And the red and yellow bandanas that the people were shaking like this, and the T-shirts, Hulkamania.
People everywhere screaming.
Yeah, and I said, this is really big time. And so I went through this camp, and then all 4 of us kind of split off, and 2 of the guys ended up just sort of doing nothing, and 2 of us ended up forming a team, and we got booked out in Nashville, Tennessee, in November of 1985. It was Thanksgiving Day was my very first match in 1985.
So now who was the guy that was with you?
He later became the Ultimate Warrior.
Okay, the Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm learning something new every day. So there you go, and you and him, I guess, then begin to have some success.
Yeah.
And so when did Sting come into the picture? And how did Sting come into the picture?
Yeah, I started out as, we were together, the Freedom Fighters. I mean, it was kind of like, you know, gag me with a spoon kind of a thing, you know, red, white, and